Happy Cinco de Mayo, everyone. Um, Hope that you are doing well. We're tracking with World War One now and trying to understand how it started. And we started talking yesterday about these atmospheric conditions of the hyper-nationalism or jingoism, social Darwinism, militarism, the system of alliances. Here's a map that depicts the system of alliances as they initially were. You can see the central powers there, sometimes called the Triple Alliance, in the red, Germany and Austria-Hungary and Italy. And then what will happen is Italy will actually switch sides, basically before really the war begins. And they will fight with the Triple Entente, who was initially France, Great Britain, and Russia, which you see in the blue there. What will happen, though, is that Turkey will join in, or the Ottoman Empire will join in for the Central Powers, and that will, shift some of the rhetoric around the war a little bit too, as we will see eventually. This is something we want to return to in just a second, but what we need to understand now is this spark that lit the match, or lit the flame of World War One. Because what we have so far is just atmospheric conditions, worrisome tension in the air, basically. But what we will see now is the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Now, Franz Ferdinand was a member of the Habsburg family, a very, very famous family in European history, once in charge of the Holy Roman Empire. They had members of their family on the throne of France and Spain and Germany and England and even Russia at various points. And what's going to happen here is the Archduke is going to visit the city of Sarajevo, and he's going to be assassinated by a member of a secret society called the Black Hand, basically sort of a ragtag group. Some of them were anarchists, and some of them were communists, and some of them were nihilists, but they all knew that they didn't like the powerful Austria-Hungary. So they swore basically an oath that they were going to assassinate Franz Ferdinand in the early summer of 1914. So I want to talk to you about what happened on that day, the assassination, because it is an interesting story, but it's also, of course, the sort of final cause of World War One. What you're seeing here is a map of the route on June 28th of 1914 that Franz Ferdinand was taking as he visited this famous city, Sarajevo. You'll notice that the initial route was along this riverfront, and it was basically a parade route. He was being welcomed with some amount of fanfare. And then he was going to give a speech at the town hall. And then afterwards, he was initially supposed to head back and head to another visit, and then head to the hotel. That did not take place. So here's what happens. The members of the Black Hand positioned themselves along the route, and they basically swore this oath. They basically said, like, if you don't succeed, if you don't have your shots, I'll do my thing. And they were supposed to basically all be firmly committed to this attempt. The real attempt on Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie's life happens right here at number 3. This man threw a bomb, and basically he missed. It actually bounced off a sign on the other side of the street, and it landed in the crowd, and there were people gravely injured. At that point, the car sped off, and these other people did not have their opportunity to try to finish what had been started. But the member of the Black Hand here actually jumped into the river and took a vial of cyanide. He was trying to commit suicide. Turns out the river was like 3 feet deep, and so he didn't drown. and the cyanide was too old, so all he got was sick. He didn't actually die from it, so he got arrested. Franz Ferdinand actually gives his speech, although it was somewhat harried and stressful. He gave his speech anyway at the town hall, and then was heading on. Now, what happened was there was a change of plans, which his driver did not get the full signal for. The change of plans was that they were going to go on to the hospital. You can see here that there's dotted line that was the changed route, and they were headed to the hospital instead to visit the wounded people in this assassination attempt. But the driver didn't know that, and so they're in this sort of caravan, this cavalcade of cars, and they are headed, and his driver turns. At which point the driver is alerted to the fact that they're no longer taking the initial route, that they need to stop and turn the car about and continue on to the hospital. So the car stops right here. And this is, well, really unfortunate. It's a moment that changes everything, because right here was a man named Gavrilo Princip, and he's sitting at a cafe here. He had a sandwich and he was waiting, and there's this a sense in which he was grieving their lack of success. Some people theorize that he knew the secondary routes and that he was waiting for another chance. But his chance really only happens because the car stopped right in front of him. So he walked right up to the car, and he shot both Sophie and Franz Ferdinand from close range. And Sophie and Franz Ferdinand are one of the rare couples in European royalty that actually had a deep and abiding love for one another. And so the death is actually really, really heartbreaking. Franz Ferdinand basically begging his wife to stay alive for their children, and they essentially die in each other's arms. What happens next is Austria-Hungary wants justice, and they want basically Serbia to give over their control of their government, autonomy to their government, to Austria-Hungary, and they want, full-on punishments. And they say if their demands aren't met, they're going to mobilize their army against Serbia by the end of the summer. The problem with that is Serbia has an alliance with Russia. So what ends up happening is Austria-Hungary says, okay, Germany, if we go to war against Serbia, will you help us? And they say yes. Now that means both alliances are initiated on the possibility of war over Franz Ferdinand's assassination. But Germany and Austria-Hungary have been thinking about this possibility of war for a while. The atmospheric conditions, some of their leadership are actually social Darwinists. They have been preparing for what would happen if they had war, because you can see they have a problem. They are naturally surrounded before the war even starts. They're already fighting a two-front war, which is a real challenge. So what they have been working on is called the Schlieffen Plan. Sorry, you can't quite see the spelling here, but it's S-C-H and then what you can see, Schlieffen Plan. And basically the Schlieffen Plan called for the invasion of France first before turning your attention, or Germany's attention, towards Russia. So what Germany decided to do, as war seemed more and more imminent, was to basically take the initiative. They felt like they were in a position that they had to attack first, or else they would be really, really in trouble, given that they were already surrounded. And the Schlieffen Plan had actually said what the Germans will do is invade down through what are called the Low Countries. You can see here Belgium and Luxembourg, with very little of their troops actually crossing the border between Germany and France. A large part of that is that France had been protecting this border as much as they could. So Germany's avoiding a lot of that. And also this is densely forested and hillier, and there are bigger rivers. And this is low country. It's flat, a little bit more open. So they figured this would be easier to invade. They would make faster progress, which they did. Initially, as they came down through the Netherlands and Belgium and into northern France, they were making very, very rapid progress. In fact, shockingly rapid, because this is the first war where they were using mechanized vehicles. The troop movement was happening so much faster than had ever happened before. Now, there have been wars where trains were used, but not motorized vehicles like they were using in this war, trucks. And it looked like France was about to collapse, and so Germany's Schlieffen plan was going to work to perfection. They were going to take Paris and then turn their attention over to Russia. But at the last second, in a very important battle called the First Battle of the Marne, the French were able to mobilize themselves and get their troops into place. You can actually see the Marne River, after which it is named, right here. And so you can see just how close to Paris the Germans had gotten. The Germans were within about 25 miles of Paris when they were finally stopped. And sort of famously, it was a sort of nick of the moment thing. Some people actually give credit to the Parisian taxi cabs. And you can see them here, basically transporting troops to the front line as a stopgap measure to stop the German advance. And the Parisian taxi cabs do play a role, but it's also military trucks, and it's, troops marching, and it's trains. It's all of the above. But what ends up happening is really essential. It's going to be our topic for tomorrow. The German progress is stopped, and now the war grinds to a halt. It's going to, in a sense, deteriorate into trench warfare rather quickly, for which World War I is very famous. So we're going to have to talk about why did it deteriorate into such a stagnant war of what we might call attrition, where the only strategy was kill as many of the other people as you can to wear them down. So tomorrow that's going to be our goal. Try to figure out why did it stagnate into trench warfare, and what was trench warfare like. In the meantime, enjoy your Cinco de Mayo, and I will see you tomorrow.